Hey, Savannah, to be a fly on the wall in there in Buckingham Palace. Just imagine the tension that there's been over the past 48 hours in the halls of that place. But now it does look as if Harry, by standing firm, has managed to force his family to listen. There have been reports that over the past few months he was trying to get a meeting with the Queen to discuss his hopes and ambitions, and that he was stopped from doing that. Well, that is not the case now. Now, the Queen reported to have told both Prince Charles and Prince William to talk with Harry's team and get a deal done within days. In many ways, I think that is a victory for Harry and Meghan. Meghan already, Savannah, is back in Canada, we think, with baby Archie. So they are absolutely determined. And I think, in a sense, what you've seen here is the two sides of Harry, really. The petulant and frankly, guy who, frankly, throws a tantrum when the story is leaked to a newspaper and puts out this statement because he's so furious. And on the other side, of course, the determined, loyal man who knows what he needs to do for his family and stands by his wife. So really, those two sides, something like a Shakespearean drama, isn't it? Now, the question is, what will the deal be? I think it's really possible that in many ways Harry and Meghan will get their way, that they will get to split their time between here and North America, that they will get to keep their home, Frogmore Cottage at Windsor Castle. I think they will get their royal protection. I think for them to lose that protection would just be too risky, too dangerous. And that particularly if anything happened to them, of course, the backlash against the palace here would be terrible. So I think they'll get all those things. The reports say negotiations are happening not just with the palaces, but even with governments to iron out, to figure out how to do all this. Who knows what will happen with their titles? But then in the longer term, I think the real question is, can they make it work? Can they make a separate foundation, charitable enterprise that is not fully within the royal tent, if you like? Can they really make that work? Will they be like royals in exile? Will they be like a separate royal court, and in that sense end up in competition with the palaces here? There are so many questions still unanswered, Savannah, and the people who are trying to come up with the answers are right in there. Savannah?
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.